go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for spending your Saturday with us. I'm here to introduce Chris White. Chris White was 2020's Indiana Author Award winner in fiction for her book, The Life List of Adrian Mandrick. Her plays have been produced nationally and internationally, including Rhythms, Helen Hayes Award winner for Outstanding New Play. Chris wrote, directed, and produced short film Mud Lotus, which was an official selection at U.S. festivals. Chris White's life as an artist has been quite varied. Filmmaker, vocalist, novelist, screenwriter, playwright, professor, actor, director. She will help us understand how these different experiences feed off of one another and what she once saw as a deficit that she never stuck to one mode of expression she now sees as an asset. I bet some of us can understand that. I want to thank our sponsors for helping us have this Women's Expo this year and having it virtually. It's a little different. I'd like to thank Brenda Buckingham Airman, Glenda Fry, the Friends of the Frankfurt Library, Dennis Hoffman, Allison Mon, NHK, Sayota Zai, Susie Rusk, Nancy Ward, Zonta of Frankfurt, and Pam Nichols. This event is made possible with the support of Indiana Humanities and the Glick Philanthropies. All right, Chris, is there anything you'd like to say before we get started with the questions?
I just want to say thank you. I'm just thrilled to be here and be a part of this expo and your great organization. And thanks to all the sponsors you just mentioned too.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's start off with the questions, and then we should have time afterwards for questions from you wonderful people that are in attendance. So I know you work in a number of different artistic genres, and I read about your initial concern that you couldn't stick to one thing. Do you think you're brought up to believe that if we engage in a wide spectrum of creative endeavors, that we are somehow watering down our potentials?
I think it's that old saying, jack of all trades, master of none, got in my head. But I've been singing and acting, writing, drawing, making tapes and videos since I was a kid. It seems natural enough to me and to many of us, I think. I mean, especially these days, right? Everybody's creating content of all sorts all the time. But yeah, over the years, I began to see that one mode of expression tended to lead naturally to another, and that they informed each other in really helpful ways.
Do you work on different types of projects all at once, or do you hone in on one at a time and let that be your focus? For example, I have this book idea, I'm going to focus on this, or I have a film idea, this is where all my energy is going to go. How does your process work? What do you do?
Well, for all my varied interests, I really do have to focus on one thing at a time. It's hard for me to even read 2 books at the same time. I also teach. I teach creative writing at DePaul University, and I even find it difficult to write when I'm teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I think I tend to need to sort of immerse myself in what I'm writing. So it's a little like a religious retreat or some kind of self-imposed exile. So I like that really concentrated version of it.
Yeah, I can see that. What are some of the ways one mode of expression has influenced another for you?
I mean, there's so many ways. I started out singing and acting, I guess, which led me, I think, to want to write my own material. So I started writing my own songs and my own plays, and began working pretty consistently as a playwright. And then after coming to NYU for grad school as an older adult, studying screenwriting, I started working more in screenplays, which is a relatively natural leap from plays, as you might imagine. I got very excited about what I was learning through working in screenwriting about structure, narrative momentum. And I think that influenced my sense of pacing and awareness of plot structure as I started working on my novel. So, I don't know, focus on character, dialogue, theme, obviously bridges them all, I think. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I know that I knew instantly I wanted to be an artist, but then once I got to high school, I was like, no, I want to be a journalist. That's what I'm going to do. But
Yeah.
then I ended up doing art, but it's
Yeah,
easy
we
to,
go
it's
through
easy
these
to,
things.
yeah, it's easy to love everything. It's easy
Yeah.
to,
And I really do think it's so much more common these days, folks are, playwrights are working in television, and, screenwriters are working in TV. I mean, everybody's working in TV now, right? Everybody wants a TV gig. But,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, and with social media, there's so much expression of so many varied forms all the time that I think what was once somewhat unusual is, for me, in my life, is now, I think, a lot more common.
Yeah. Does conflict breed creativity or does calm breed creativity?
I have to say that for me, conflict breeds creativity. I think if there's no problem for me to consider an attempt to solve, no tension, at least on an internal level, there's less impetus to write. Luckily, life is constantly giving us new material of that in that regard.
Yeah.
But to write, there does have to be some calm. So I think maybe the birth of it comes out of conflict, but the doing of it comes out of calm.
Yeah, that makes
For
a lot of
me.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the most difficult part of your artistic process?
I would say, for me, most definitely the beginning. When I'm trying to get the ideas, trying to birth the ideas and have them make sense together, go somewhere. Plot is tough, which is a part of that beginning. For me, plot is tough. And I guess I've found that if I don't have at least some sense of clarity about where something is going, I can end up wasting significant time and energy. I might get there eventually, but it can be a long haul. It's always a long haul, but yeah, I think the beginning is the toughest. Once I know what my job is, I love it,
Yeah.
but it's the finding out what my job is. Like, if somebody
Yeah.
would just give me an assignment, I'd be fine.
Yeah. Right.
That's why we like school, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you take some of the hard part out.
Here, read this book, write this paper.
Yeah, give
I
me a
love it.
prompt.
Thank you. How important for you is the rewriting process?
I would say, it's 80% of the process. I think it's everything. Sometimes I tell my students that revision is the way that a slab of clay that starts to resemble a figure gets honed down draft by draft to become a character that seems to live and breathe. I mean, it is the process, in my opinion, and certainly has been that way in my writing life.
I sent your film Mud Lotus to those who signed up for this program. What do you want people to take from it? What was your purpose? What do you hope we took from it? Those of us that watched it.
That's that tricky question, right? I want to answer it, but I resist it,
No, I know why you're saying that. I get why you're saying that.
It's like saying, this is what you want someone to feel when you're making love to them. It's like, you ruin the spontaneous, experimental, experiential nature of the interaction that way. I think everybody's experience is their own, and with a piece of art. On the other hand, having said that, I guess I would want people to maybe rethink of the title, maybe look at the title of Mud Lotus. That sort of encapsulates some of what I think that the film is about. I I sometimes study Buddhism and
Great.
this idea that the suffering, sort of the mud of life, is not only not only not only can we grow in spite of that, but we actually have to have it in order to grow. So it's the mud that allows the lotus to emerge. Um,
I mean,
though, yeah, though it's painful, it's messy, it's what it takes, right? To
yeah, you
move,
gotta
to
see you
change.
gotta have the darkness to see the light, you gotta,
Exactly.
yeah, I enjoyed your film. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Where did the idea come from for this film?
Um, it came at an interesting time in my life. It started actually as a full-length play, and
Huh.
I in my writing life it did. It was never produced as such. I had little workshops, but then ended up making it a short, though it's not as short as a short implies, since it's like 25 minutes long. But in my work as a musician, singer, and music producer, I had worked several times with Tibetan flutist Nawang Khechog, who had been a Buddhist monk for several years before becoming a musician. He was a very fascinating, wonderful person who, at one point, told me a story that becomes meaningful in the film and is somewhat fictionalized. And I was also going through a really painful divorce at the time that I started writing that story. And I think I was interested in those two energies, seemingly at opposite ends of the spectrum. This Buddhist monk and these crazy ass this couple warring it out, to see what would happen if they came together. And so that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. Let's see. How long did that project take from start to finish? What was the most difficult aspect of doing this film?
Mm. Well, can I just take this opportunity just to say a couple names, because it's such an
Yeah,
amazing,
yeah,
some
please
interesting
do.
things have not come out of this film, but have happened after the production of this film. I mean, my co-producer and editor was Jonathan Nichols Pethick, who I work with at DePaul, and then my husband Tom Chiarella, who's a very prominent writer, is the was an executive producer for the film, and also took on a bunch of dirty work that no one else wanted to do. So he was at the top and at the bottom, kind of holding us up and holding the bar as well. But also my assistant director and associate producer for the film is Chinoya Chukwu, who's also a DePaul, who is a DePaul alumna, who is now a renowned filmmaker of the film. I don't know if you saw it, Clemency.
Yes,
And
I
first
know.
Black woman to win the
Yes.
grand jury prize at Sundance.
No,
She was my
I,
assistant director, meaning I had called her up and said, help, I have a
wow.
million questions. I'm trying to make a film, because even though I taught screenwriting and she was in my screenwriting class at DePaul, I really had never made a film before. And so I was talking to her on the phone, and I kept asking question after question. And she said, finally, there was this pause, and she said, do you just want me to come help you make this film?
That's pretty cool.
I
I've
said,
read a
yes,
lot about
please.
her.
Yeah,
That's
she's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah,
And
she
then
is. She
also
sounds.
our director of photography, has had this, he's just shooting up to the stars as well. He's Eric Bronco, and is now sort of dominating Sundance year after year and doing amazing projects. We had an amazing cast, which included veteran Hollywood film actor Ray Don Chong, as well as Ron Dye, who is a professor at DePauw, but also actor, amazing songwriter, playwright, and then film, TV, and stage director, and stage actor Adam Tran, and newcomer Liz Chiarella, who is our young teen.
Yeah.
So I just feel like I got very lucky to get to work with such amazing people. Obviously, process took, I would say, over a year,
Okay.
including pre-production and post-production. And probably the toughest part was the editing process, maybe, just because it took us forever, because I was so controlling, and driving my editor Jonathan crazy, looking over his shoulder, making him, I'm pretty sure I drove him crazy, but I think I had driven him crazy prior to that, so I think he was pretty used to it. But yeah, that might have been the most difficult part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you know, such an important part
Right.
of the
You,
making process, right?
you said that Ron was a musician. Was that his music on the?
Yes. Some of it was. Some of it was.
Okay. That's funny. Yeah.
Like at the end, there's a song, a very beautiful song, and that's
Yes.
him.
I loved it. I love
And
that
then
song.
there's some little bits of guitar stuff in and out. He and Istvan Chicherironi did that music, and
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, there were a number of different ways that we put the music together for that film. But he's an amazing songwriter.
Yeah, I really like that song at the end. It's great.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So you are also a playwright. How is that writing process different from writing for film?
For me, it's very different. I'm not sure I have a really great rationale for it. I just know that many of the constraints that I feel when I'm working on a screenplay kind of go out the window when I'm working on a play. I know that I think that students in my playwriting classes feel very different than the students in my screenwriting classes, because screenwriting is so much about structure, and there's a lot of outlining that happens. It's a little like boot camp for quite a while in the process before you're like, okay, now you can write it. Whereas a play, for me, and I'm sure there are people that teach playwriting very differently than this, but I'll just speak for myself as a playwright, that for me, it tends to feel more like there's something like it's a cauldron, and the writer is sort of shaman, trying to allow something transformational to sort of rise up, which I know is a romantic notion, but and it's still really, really, really hard work. But I think just because theater is so ancient and also very malleable, I think a lot of people see film as being the more the genre with a lot more possibility, but on some level, there's a lot more diversity of expression in certain regards in playwriting than there is in film. You can really do anything on a stage, stylistically, whereas film really has a lot of rules to follow. And I think that playwriting is also obviously different because it's, a living thing. It stays a living thing, it keeps changing and living and breathing. And so it's inspiring in a different way, I think, in that regard.
What has been your favorite creation and why?
I guess I would have to say my novel that you referenced earlier, just because I was with it for such a long time and kind of grew along with it, definitely grew along with it. And, there's just something sort of amazing about having a book you've written to hold in your hand that goes on without you. Yeah, I would say that would be it for me.
Where did the idea for the life list of Adrienne Mandryk come from?
Not to over reference my divorce, but But I got a lot out of that divorce, you know. I um, the first idea for the book came. I was sitting on an airplane, actually, by myself, with next to a stranger, and I don't know. We got into one of those conversations you get into when you're on an airplane. And this person, this man that I was sitting next to, ended up telling me a story about a birder, which is something I'd never really thought about in my life. That there were these people that were so very, very serious about the birds that they saw, and in fact making lists of the species that they saw. This man told me about a very well-known birder and very high-level birder who had gotten notice of a rare species that had been sighted, you know, some distance from his home, and he and his wife, he brought his wife with him, and they got in the car and they started traveling to this place, and they stopped to get gas, and and he forgot his wife at the gas station and drove for about an hour and a half before he remembered that she was supposed to be in the car with him. Which if you've read the book, you know is a pretty much lifted directly from that story. There's a scene in the book very much like that, and I was just compelled by that story, all that implied about that man, who then slowly became the protagonist in my book, after having originally started as the antagonist, really, in the book. So yeah, that's where the idea came from.
I just don't know how you leave your wife at the gas station.
You've got to be obsessed, right? You've got to be single-minded. To be the best.
That cracked me up. I'm sorry. I read that and I know what was supposed to be kind of mad or whatever, but I just it's kind of funny.
I mean, you can't avoid it. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know a single thing about birds, so I'm curious of what type of research you had to do for this book, and how long did you spend doing the research before you started doing your writing?
I mean, research was an enormous part of the book for me, and I also fell in love with research in writing this book. I had obviously done research with a lot of other projects I'd written, but this was by far the most extensive, because I really didn't know anything about birds other than that I love them, and that I love seeing them, and it always feels like a blessing, and sort of the awareness that they're always there. I mean, at least for the time being, although their numbers are diminishing as we speak. So all of that is very meaningful to me, but I didn't know about this world of birding at all. So I was very lucky to find some real experts who were willing to help me out. Larry Balch had been the president of the American Birding Association for many years, and I was able to contact him, and he helped me so much, from sort of right in the beginning all the way through until the book had been placed with Simon & Schuster Touchstone Books, and we were on our very final draft, and I was still asking him to read one more draft to make sure that I really wanted to get everything right, because my character is not just a casual birder, he's one of the best. And so, and then Betsy Ficus is another very well-known birder and very top-level birder who helped me all along the way. I had to research about Army Rangers also for another scene in the book. We got to talk with some of those folks for long periods of time. Anesthesiologists and other doctors. I had someone I spoke to somewhat extensively, several different people, but one, Dr. Matt Andre, who's in Bloomington, talked to me about opioid addiction. Had to research the places in the books, especially the ones I hadn't actually been to before, like the Rio Grande area and Cascades Mountains. And so I did a lot of research. Yeah, pretty much from the beginning all the way through to the end.
Do
And I
you think
loved it.
the real, yeah, it sounds like it. Do you think the real Adrian Mandrake, if he read this, would be honored that he was mentioned?
Um,
That you wrote a book kind of around him, loosely written about him?
I really wish I knew the answer. I really, I wonder, whether, because honestly, I sort of stole his profession as well. The original story is about an anesthetist. And my character is an anesthesiologist. So, I mean, I don't know if that person who left his wife at the gas station has read my book or not. I don't know how happy he would be about the whole thing. But if you're out there anywhere, sir,
Right.
please contact me immediately.
And I want to know too. I'm curious. I mean, I would be honored to know.
I hope his marriage is still great and thriving,
Yeah.
and
And it's a story they laugh about. You're right.
Yeah,
They're married, they're happy. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's like that.
What was the rest of your writing process like for the book? Like after the research, like once you had the research, then you just put it together, right? You just write it, right?
It's about 3 or 4 weeks and it was done. Yeah, no, it took, a really, I mean, as I mentioned, I didn't really do all the research and then write the book. I mean, I just started and then found out what I needed to know and then, went back a million times. And so it wasn't quite that organized. But the writing process was kind of interesting to me anyway, because as I alluded to or mentioned before, Adrian, who's the protagonist of the book, though not always particularly likable, was originally really the sort of the antagonist of the book. And his wife, Stella, was the original protagonist of the book. So it was more through her perspective. In fact, there were actually a number of perspectives and points of view in the original drafts, but hers was the main one. And then over time, Adrian began to take over, and on a more personal note, as my marriage did fall apart, and I think in that way that I mentioned before, how sometimes conflict breeds the artistic process for me, I think I became more and more interested in understanding and even empathizing with the male character in that story. I think that was a greater challenge in certain ways for me, and I liked the challenge of, because he was a little bit of he was just sort of a bad guy in the beginning of my writing process, which is just kind of bad writing, unless you're writing sort of I don't know, an action film or something. So yeah, he took over and he taught me a lot of things and showed me in the ways in which I'm like him and the ways in which many of us are like him. And so that was one of the great things about the process for me.
What was the biggest challenge about writing that? Was it switching protagonist, antagonist, or was that an issue? Was that a challenge, or what was your biggest challenge?
It was actually a pretty damn big challenge because I'd already been working on it for many years.
Right.
When I had kind of given up for a little while and was kind of feeling low about it. And the very well-known novelist, Robert Boswell, was visiting DePauw, where I work, to do a reading for our Kelly Writers series. And we went out to dinner, a number of us, with the visiting writer, Robert Boswell. I happened to be sitting next to him and we were having dessert. I had never even brought up that I was writing a novel, even though I knew that that's what he was all about. And in fact, writes books about how to write novels. But he said, so what are you working on? And so then I was compelled to answer. And not very long into the conversation, he said, I think you just need somebody to give it a fresh read. Would you like me to read it? And I said, yes, I would. And he wrote me this amazing set of notes that came to me in about 2 days, one of which was, this story belongs to Adrian. And I know that you see that by the things that you're writing, but you haven't quite, I think you need to have him be the primary, the only, protagonist. And I was like, oh my
Oh,
God.
man.
So I knew he was right, because and so that was a big rewrite, and continued to be a big rewrite for another couple of years, few years.
Well, it turned out great. I loved it. I loved every minute
Thank
of
you.
it. So it was a fast read for me, and I'm not a fast reader. So it was like I didn't want to put it down. So
That's
I think
that's the best. Thank you.
it was a great choice, He
was right.
Yeah, he was right. And you were right, because he said you knew what you were supposed to do. You just hadn't done it.
Yeah. That's what we do as writers a lot of times. We know, but we're just hoping that we won't have to do it,
Yeah.
that we'll get away without doing it.
Yeah. I do some things like that at work too, but
In your artwork, you mean, or in your
that would work.
Huh?
I try to get away from doing things.
Yeah. We all do, right?
Hoping I can,
Avoid
but
it.
anyway, my supervisor's right there, so we'll just pretend I'm not saying.
We'll talk later.
Yeah, we'll talk later. Are you reading anything right now?
I actually am, but and it's an amazing play called. Let's see, I have it here somewhere. It's got my notes all written all over the front of. This is a Pulitzer Prize winning play called Fairview. And it is written by Jackie Sibley's Drury. It's a highly innovative play about race and whiteness and the white gaze. It's pretty stunning. So I'm teaching it.
Oh, great. Wow.
And so I'm rereading it right now, because I'm teaching it next week.
Oh, great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Have you guys had a chance to talk about it yet at all? Or are you guys
in that particular play?
Yeah, that class that you're teaching it. Have you guys
No,
touched on it yet?
we're gonna talk about it Thursday of next week, or I think, we actually have a spring break day next week. So I think we're actually starting to talk about it the Tuesday after that.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see, and students are getting together to read it aloud next Thursday.
Oh, nice.
So, because it's tough in certain ways to read off the page.
Yeah.
And so they're going to read it aloud. I hope that's what I asked them to do anyway.
Well, I'm sure they'll listen.
Of course. Surely they will.
I'm sure they will. So how have you learned to handle criticism, and any advice for fellow artists out there? Artists as in filmmaker wannabes, writers, anything like that?
I mean, obviously criticism, as we all know, is a big part. Handling criticism is a big part of this, of any of these businesses, right? Any of these art forms. I definitely think you have to get very used to it. I mean, you get to a certain point where you're like, oh, it was a rejection, but it was a good rejection, right? It's like a better rejection than some other rejections I've had. It's like the best worst date. But I mean, it's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of rejections over the course of a writer's life. Everything from as an actor, right, in an audition, or as a writer with editors or publishers. I don't know how it is in your kind of art world, but I'm sure there's some kind of something like that in
there is.
arts.
And I experienced, my husband's an editor too, a book editor. He has a couple master's degrees in fiction too, so he's experienced. He went to the Iowa Writers Workshop and did all that stuff. Good. So he's, we talk about writing, and talk a lot about art.
What is his name?
Corbin Collins.
Okay.
He works for O'Reilly Publishing.
Excellent.
So
so I mean, he knows. He's often on the other. He's been on probably both sides of that
He really has.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So
yeah,
it's tough. It's tough. Rejection's tough. And I'm sure,
yeah.
um,
But
you know,
it
and
does start to eventually start to roll off your back a little bit.
yeah. I mean, rejection can be not getting your painting sold when it's in a museum, or when at an
Right.
art show. That's
Exactly.
hard, taking home all your paintings, dragging them home.
Right. You have to have
And then
every wall with
hanging them
just
in your
own
house,
art.
because
Yeah,
that's where all your old unsold paintings go, on
yeah,
your back wall of your house.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but
Advice for fellow
yes,
artists? Advice for
advice,
fellow
please.
that's a big question.
Yeah.
I would just, here's what I would say. I think that one of the things that I've learned uh, is that it's funny. It's just an interesting segue from your last question, but about rejection. But I think you have to do your own thing. Like you can't always wait around for somebody else to say yes, for somebody else to give you permission, for somebody else to get on your side. And you have to just keep going. And, for example, had an interesting thing that happened to me when I was playwright, and I was also newly married and pregnant, and then had a baby, and had moved from like New York City to rural Virginia.
Oh,
And I remember thinking, my career is over. Um, and I was nursing a lot, and I started writing these little monologues and little tiny short pieces based on the people that I was meeting there, especially women actually that I was meeting there. And I actually finished this very odd, unusual play, unusual in structure. And I was speaking to one of my friends who lived there. It happens to be a kind of eclectic, cool community in Virginia. But I said, so what, there's nothing to be done with it. I'm living in the middle of nowhere. And she said, why don't you just do it? I was like, what, in our little town of 200? She said, yeah, do it at the town hall. Why are you doing it? You're doing it so you can, she sort of challenged me to not be that person that I was being. And I, in fact, prepared to direct it. And I put ad in the New York Post, because the place I lived was near Washington, D.C. I mean, Washington Post was near Washington, D.C. Got this great cast of 7 women, of 7 people who auditioned. And that play ended up winning the Helen Hayes Award for Best New Play after it was moved to DC. So, I mean, I learned a lot from that. Just do it yourself. Just make it happen. Make your own art, and then see what follows, and try not to obsess about what other people are thinking and whether it's going to be accepted for this or that. Just do it.
no, that's great. I love it. I love
Make
that
your own
story.
film, right? Do your own thing.
Yeah, that's a great story. Okay, I think that's a great thing to end on, maybe. Um,
Sounds good.
and maybe we'll see if anyone has any questions out here.
Great.
If you're don't have your picture on, you can ask questions in the chat. And the title of the play, was that your Rhythms play that you were
Yeah.
talking about?
Uh-huh.
So that play was Rhythms, that she was just talking about, if that's what you're.
Oh, am I supposed to look at the chat as well?
Oh, I can. No, that's okay.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people here
I
that can
hope
read.
his wife finds the book first. I love that. Adrian Star, yeah, the real person. Yeah, I agree. I have to say,
Can I ask a question?
please.
Hi, nice to meet you.
too.
So I am a journal writer. Like, I have 40 years worth of journals, and I have a blog at work, and I'm trying to transition into playwriting. But the thing that scares me is I feel like it's too personal. Like, I'm writing from personal experience, and I don't, and that always stops me, because I think, what if somebody thinks, this is my life. And I don't know, is that a real fear? How do you overcome that fear? And how do you not continuously write from a personal place, or does everybody write from a personal place?
Yeah. That's such a central question, that we all grapple with. I mean, I think I have a couple of different responses. One of them is that I think, paradoxically, perhaps the most universal work, whether it be in novel form or play form, tends to be the most idiosyncratic. So I think the fact that it's very personal and specific to you is probably a really good thing. If you're going to write it as a piece of fiction, as a play, for example, you can mess with it a bit, so that it's not literally the same. I mean, I think we all do that. And there's a lot of my own life in everything that I write. But in terms of how do you get past that fear, I think you have to like walk into that dark room. I don't think there's any way to do it. The only thing that sort of that keeps you doing it, I think, is having done it and feeling what it feels like, both in terms of the sort of deeper acceptance of self, but also it kind of works. And once you're like, oh, it kind of works, then it's the part of you that wants to have it work, I think, will come back and do it again. But yeah, there's no real way to make it comfortable before you're doing it, I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
I hope you do it. I think that's fantastic that you want to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm going to try. I'll give myself permission.
Good. Let me know how it goes.
Okay.
All right, we have Susan. Do you ever get bored with the story you are creating, and what do you do then?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I get bored, but I get a lot of other things that are negative. Like I get judgmental. I get frustrated and feel like I can't possibly do it. Things like that. And again, I think you just have to keep showing up at the typewriter and wrestling with that stuff. All kinds of things like that. I think, over a process, the kind of time frame that it takes to create a novel or a play or piece of memoir or whatever it is, you're gonna have those days just like anything else, and you got to it's like a marriage, you have to keep showing up and doing your best every day, whether or not you particularly feel like it.
You mentioned if someone would just give me an assignment, what is the first 1 or 2 assignments you would give someone else? So I guess you do give assignments though. So it's
do give assignments. It would depend on what kind of class I was teaching though. I think in a playwriting class, for example, maybe a good assignment to start out with would be to write. I think a lot of the things that I see with students is, and with all of us, is that we don't realize what it is that we know, because it's so normal to us to know it, that we're not aware that it's extraordinary that we know that. Like somebody, might be working on a beef cattle ranch, and that wouldn't be that their dad did that and now they do that, and like, yeah, so what? But I mean, for the rest of us, we're like, please tell us, about working on a cattle ranch. I mean, it's totally fascinating. And I think we all have those things, So one of my assignments is to write a dialogue between 2 characters who are both experts in a certain field, arguing about that thing. They've found a place of disagreement that they're arguing from, and I tell my students that they have to write something that they're expert in, and then they balk at that and say, I'm not an expert in anything, and then we find out that in fact they are. And so it's, it kind of gives you the authority that it kind of encourages you to believe in your own authority.
Yeah.
As a voice, as a writing voice.
I'd like to turn my therapist notes into a book.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's called memoir, isn't it? Yeah, you should do it.
I just want to see those just for a minute.
Yeah. Oh, you mean her? Yeah, but about you, right?
Yeah, the ones, see what they say about me. We'll
Yeah.
just turn those into a book. She'll do all the
I
work
like it.
for me.
Yeah.
I like this question. How important is the community of other writers to you?
Very important in certain ways. For inspiration, it's always important, no matter what field you're working in, and also support. You know, whether it's the larger community of writers that you're reading, or whether it's people you're working near or with or around that you can actually talk to about your work. And I have a few of those very key people, some really good friends. You know, my friend Kathy Malik has read so many drafts of so many things I've written that it's unbelievable what she's gone through. My friend Lily Wright, who's a novelist and nonfiction person and journalist, has been a great support for me. So those are my more, you know, closer ones to me. But, you know, when you're working in something like playwriting or screenwriting, it becomes, I don't know, it feels even more essential, the larger or the sort of the medium-sized community. For example, it was kind of hard for me when I moved to this small town in Indiana, after having lived in New York City and Los Angeles and places where, and near DC, places where theater is, there's so much more of it. So in that way, I think, you know, it was kind of a little bit tough for me to lose that community. And yet that's the only reason I wrote the novel. So I'm not gonna, I don't regret it, but yeah, I think community is very important in a lot of different ways.
Right. Yeah. The young girl in Mud Lotus was such an unflinching character. I think of her as a role model for so many youth. That was a comment from Pamela.
Wow. Yeah, she's a great character. And the actor that played that character had never really acted before.
Ugh.
I have to tell a tiny story about that because it's so fun. So she auditioned like over Zoom before we were all doing Zoom or whatever we called it back then, whatever that was, FaceTime or something. And she had just been turned down for any role in her like middle school play. And then I hired her to do this, and then she came out, and you talk about baptism by fire, man. She was in it, and she just grew and grew and was amazing. And then she got to like go back to her hometown in New York and had this film that she was starring in. And it was like, I guess the greatest sense of like, gotcha, you know.
Yeah. Right
Don't
on.
cast me in your play, damn it, you know.
Yeah, I didn't want to be in your play.
Yeah. She was great. And that character is very dear to me as well, kind of based a little bit on a childhood friend of mine.
Yeah, she was great. I mean, everyone that was in that film was fantastic. So
It's a great job.
Felt real, felt great. The connection between the husband and wife felt very emotional, was very intense.
Yeah, it was.
So
it blows me away to see them together. I get very excited when they're on screen together.
Yep. That was a good match. That was
Mhm.
they really played that character.
I agree. Yeah. Any other questions?
See anyone up? Susie Rusk, let's see.
I read the book, I couldn't put it down. And I thought that the ending in the swamp, I'm not going to give anything away, but the ending in the swamp, I did not see that coming. And I just thought that was excellent. And at the very end, I was glad that it wasn't cut and dried on what was going forward. I thought that was just perfect.
both of those observations mean a lot to me because those are two of the, I mean, the swamp scene is definitely
Oh, my.
one of the things I worked hardest on, and that was one of the hardest to even confront that I needed to write it. And the ending, yeah, people have mixed feelings, I think, about that. And I'm glad that you're one that's on my side.
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
yeah. It's not in a bow for sure, but I think there
Well,
are
I
other
thought the time in the swamp was exhausting.
things- yeah, it was.
You felt like you were with him and sloshing through, and
Yeah.
it was itchy and it was creepy and it was exhausting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So well done.
Thank you for telling me my book is exhausting. It really means a lot.
It was, yeah.
I want to make sure I get this question that's on the screen, and I have a very important question that I didn't ask. I want to
Okay.
know what you're working on next. That's super important for all of us to know. So let me
Thank-
ask this question, and then you have to answer that. You have to answer one of them.
Okay. Yeah.
So how filled in is the plot in your mind when you begin writing? Does it often change significantly?
Again, it's not really my strong suit. I feel like I have to work really, really hard for it. So often I may have an idea, but then, yeah, it does change. It changes significantly, thank goodness. And gets more and more filled in. There in the book, for example, I had no idea about a lot of that stuff, and it evolved. The plot formed over a number of years. So yeah, with screenplays, I try to be more organized about it and make myself do more extensive outlining. But yeah, thank you for that question, Susan.
Yeah, very cool. So what are you working on? Are you working on a book? Are you working on a film? What's in that head of yours or on that paper? What's going on? What we got?
I have been working on a second novel
Oh, yay.
for a while. It's very different from the book that we've been talking about. It's almost all from women's perspectives. I think I'd had enough years getting in the head of Adrienne, and so this is about women. It's about sexuality. It's about family and motherhood and connection across time and space, I guess I would
Oh,
say.
I like it. I like it
Yeah.
already.
I mean, it's been challenging plot wise for sure, as usual. And I keep messing with it in all these enormous ways, like I did with my other one, which isn't all that comfortable when you're doing it. It's like surgery. It's like, oh, I know I just stitched you up, but let's open you up again and move some organs around,
And so when
Sorry,
when
that's
you
not-
change something completely, do you ever do you just delete what you had completely and then change it? And so what you had before is completely gone? Wow,
Yep.
that's hard.
I mean, I think one
harsh.
time I realized that there were about 4,000 words out of the 75,000 words that remained from the original draft. That's the God's truth.
Oh, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I can't imagine.
It's like how you renew your cells every 7 years. It's like that happens with whatever project, over and over again. What you think you can't possibly lose ends up, in the deleted file. I have a file though, so it always exists, which gives me comfort to know that I can go back to it. And I sometimes do. I'll go back and take snatches of things that I had previously deleted. But so
Yeah.
anyway, working
Wow.
on it. Working on it.
Yeah, well, I like everything you said. So I think it's, I'm
Thank
looking
you.
forward to it. So,
Thank you very much.
all right. Well, is anyone else? We have any last questions for Chris before we say goodbye? Don't think I'm
Thank you.
missing any.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here on your Saturday afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. This was great. You were great. So thanks for
Thank you
coming.
for doing
All
this,
right.
Jamie. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your
Bye.
Saturday. Go
Thanks.
create.